Hello, students, and welcome back. Today we're going to talk about language and thought. Language development. How does language develop in humans? So, within the first 4 months, a child communicates specifically by crying and cooing. Usually, crying indicates something not good is happening, and cooing that the baby is enjoying something. They begin to show receptive language, which means understanding, if understanding if you're asking them things, even though they might not necessarily be able to reply. By about 4 to 10 months, between 4 and 10 months, babbling occurs. So this babbling is language specific, which means they're beginning to play around with the phonemes or the sounds of whatever language it is that they're learning. They also begin to show productive language, so like speaking a little bit, writing. Um, by 12 months, they're in the one word stage: ball, food, want. By 18 to 24, they tend to do telegraphic speech. Telegraphic speech is almost like caveman talk: me want ball. And by 24 months or more, they're in full complex sentences, at least complex for a 2-year-old. By the time you graduate, you should have 80,000 vocabulary words. How do we learn the complexity of language? So there's a couple different theories as to why this occurs. Or how do we learning the complexities of language? So in order to understand language, the first thing you need to understand is what a phoneme is. And a phoneme is the smallest unit of sound in a language. So basically the sounds that the English alphabet makes and how letters sound when they're combined with each other and so on and so forth. Then getting larger, you can combine phonemes into small bits called morphemes. These are the smallest units of meaning in a language. This also contains prefixes and suffixes. So, for example, the word undetermined, undetermined, ed, is 3 morphemes. So this explains overgeneralization when kids talk. So sometimes they'll say like, I goed to the store, he righted his bike, things like that. Syntax, on the other hand, is the rules that guide sentence structure and things like that. So specifically, like the word order. So if you're familiar with Star Wars, Yoda has a syntax problem because he doesn't go in the correct order for sentences. He tends to start with the end and then speak to the beginning. Another something that's interesting is what's called the Royal Order of Adjectives, which is just you don't need to know this, but I just think it's a fascinating thing that you learn as an English speaker without actually being taught directly. So we're going to take a quick little look at this now. For example, with the Royal Order of Adjectives, when we are describing something, we tend to go in a specific order, meaning first we give our opinion, the size of the object, the shape of the object, the age of the object, the color, the origin, the material, and a qualifier. So, for example, in English, things have to be in this order. Like I said: opinion, size, age, shape, color, origin, material, purpose, noun. So you can have a lovely little old rectangular green French silver whittling knife, but if you start messing with the order of those adjectives, it starts to sound strange. So just take a second and try to put those words in a different order in your head. If this made you feel uncomfortable, that's because you know the Royal Order of Adjectives. And then there are other things too that go along with this, like we say like ping pong and not pong ping, or things like that. And then the last thing is semantics. So semantics is knowing what words actually mean. So knowing the difference between two and two, or your and your, or there and there, or there. How do we learn language? Okay, so it's a pretty interesting process. We get about 10 new words per day between the ages of 2 and 18. Children learn basic grammar before they can add. And most kids can recall words and meanings and assemble words into sentences while simultaneously following social rules for speaking and listening. How do we develop language? So there's a couple of different theories as to how we do this. The first one is behavioral. We learn language through reward and punishment. We're rewarded for saying certain words and we're punished for saying other words. We learn through social learning. So basically we watch someone or listen to someone else and then we imitate them. Especially this really helps explain slang, for example. And then the last one is Noam Chomsky's theory of language acquisition. And he basically says that we're hardwired to learn any language rapidly and easily when we're young. Like we have a theoretical wiring part of the brain called the language acquisition device. It's theoretical, it hasn't been proven, but it helps to understand why, like if you were a baby and I took you and put you anywhere else in the world, you would become a fluent speaker of that language. It could be Mandarin, Russian, Swahili, whatever. So we have this ability, but we lose it before we can actually like appreciate it. Critical periods. So critical periods are developmental windows where we have the ability to learn the phonemes of a language effortlessly. The critical period hypothesis says that about age 7, if we don't learn language, we'll have difficulty mastering that language. So for example, a word that's easy for English speakers to say is squirrel, but squirrel is a very difficult word for people that are non-native English speakers. I remember in my time in Germany, like this was always something funny because German speakers could not say squirrel. It was a very difficult word for them to master. One reason why we know this is actually a sad story, and that's the story of Jeannie the Wild Child. Jeannie the Wild Child was, from a young age, she was tied to a bed in a basement and was not allowed to be spoken to or interact with other people. And she had a real hard time once she was like discovered and taken out of the home, learning language. And she specifically never really learned to speak English fluently. So this kind of further reinforces the idea of the critical period hypothesis. How does language influence how we think? So Worf's linguistic relativity hypothesis, or sometimes known as linguistic determinism, basically states that the language we learn influences how we think and perceive the world. So for example, certain tribes, like Inuit tribes, have multiple words for snow. And so they actually conceptualize and think about snow differently than you do because we have one word, we just say snow. Or for example, the word key or bridge is masculine or feminine, like in Spanish versus German. So if you ask a Spanish speaker to describe like a key, they're going to give you different adjectives or qualities than a German speaker would. And the same for like bridge or something like that. So again, this is just review, but aphasia can occur so these are problems with speech. So you can have Broca's aphasia or Wernicke's aphasia. Remember, Broca's aphasia is difficulty producing words, and Wernicke's aphasia is difficulty with word meaning. So we're gonna watch a quick little video about aphasias as well. Dyslexia. So dyslexia is a reading and writing disorder. It's cognitive, so it's not an intelligence thing. So it doesn't mean that a person is dumb if they struggle with decoding the symbols of language, or even there's dysgraphia as well, like where you have trouble decoding like numbers, for example. And this here is to help you to try to like kind of understand what it's like for a person who is dyslexic to try to read. So it's not that they can just memorize the words in with a different word order. It's that the word, for a lot of people with dyslexia, like is constantly changing each time they see the word. Deafness. So sign language offers many similarities to spoken language. It tends to be processed in the left hemisphere of the brain, just like normal languages. There is a different syntax for sign language, and grammar is a little bit different. Facial expressions are really important, and how intensely you gesture with your hands can like really help emphasize a point. There are accents because there are different forms of sign language all around the world. It's not just one. And one of the things that's really interesting is that deaf children actually babble. Deaf babies, they babble with their hands as a normal baby would with, I don't want to say normal, as a baby would do if they were speaking or playing with phonemes. Do other species use language? Yes. So receptive language is shown in dogs, for example, because they can follow commands, so they understand. Productive ones, productive for many animals have different ways of communicating, like dances, gestures, or something like that. What about, can we communicate with other species? So one famous example is Washa the chimpanzee, who learned 245 signs to express whatever she wanted. Um, and then one of the interesting things is then she taught other chimpanzees to use sign language as well. One of my favorite stories is that Washo had lost her baby, so they wanted to see if she would adopt a baby chimpanzee named Leolis, or Lulis, I think it's Lulis, who lost his mother. So Washo did, and then Washo taught him to sign. So she was taught to sign, and then she passed that on, which is kind of cool. So we'll watch a short video about Washo now. So Washo was able to combine words and phrases to convey meaning. So um, when she first saw an orange, but she didn't know the sign for orange, she said an apple, which is orange. So she's comparing it to, schemas and prototypes that she already has. They do not pick up words as easily as human children do. And their speech production, or I should say sign production, lacks syntax, but you could still kind of understand what they were saying. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all I have for you today with Language and Thought. If you have any questions, let me know. Otherwise, have a fantastic day.